Okay, it looks ready to go. So good morning, everyone. Some of you know me by now, but if you don't, my name is Erin Maney and I am with SUNY Online. I manage our communications and community engagement area. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our last day of Open Education Week. Although there are still some sessions tomorrow if you're looking for something to do on a Saturday morning, and that is through the openeducationweek.org website. There are some global events happening tomorrow. No SUNY webinars though. So today we are pleased to start off our day hosting Christopher Hollister from the University of Buffalo Libraries, where he is the head of scholarly communications. Christopher will be sharing about the adoption of OER-Enabled Pedagogy as a framework for engaging library and information science students in a course on international and comparative librarianship. So thank you and welcome to Christopher.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Erin. So first thing I'm going to do, I was just mentioning to Erin a few seconds ago that it feels odd to me. This is probably just a Chris thing. I don't know, but it feels odd to me to be looking at myself while I'm presenting on anything. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch off my video feed for a few minutes while I go through a handful of slides that I've prepared for today, and then I'll switch back on so we can have some face-to-face. So there's that. I'm going to share my screen. And
great.
I will change that setting. How does that look?
Perfect.
Great. Okay, so I have a lot to share, I think, and I think the allotted time is probably going to go pretty quickly, but I wanted to start by thanking the Open Education Week organizers really for their heroic efforts this year. You know, this is a SUNY community-driven undertaking this week, and it's really a nice achievement. So thank you, Erin, and everyone system-wide who has either contributed or participated in one way or another. It's been really nice. Thanks, of course, to the attendees for sharing some of their morning with me. And one last little housekeeping issue here. I just wanted to emphasize that this particular presentation is developed under Creative Commons license CC BY. So as you know from my description of this presentation and from what Erin just shared with you, this is a case study on using OER-Enabled Pedagogy. We'll circle back to that in a second, to engage library and information science students. And it's going to go like this. You know, I'll start by providing some operational definitions so I can be certain that we have a common language that we're working with. I'll give a brief description of the open pedagogical experiment that is the course and the assignment in which this action took place. I'm going to introduce a related study and share what I deem to be key results. I'll discuss a few of the implications, provide some concluding thoughts, and then field whatever comments and questions might come up. So here we go. We need to begin with some operational definitions. And given this particular venue, this week, and our limited time, really, I need to assume that attendees have some understanding of these concepts. But for the record, OERs are teaching, learning, or research materials in any format that reside in the public domain and are made available under an intellectual property license permitting free use or repurposing in educational settings. And as most of you know, the open part of OERs is really the key. And that openness is characterized by what we refer to as the 5 rights, or the so-called 5 Rs, that instructors have when using OERs in their courses, right? And these are the rights to retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute course content as they see fit. Now, the definitions vary for the term open pedagogy, which is an open pedagogical practice. Open pedagogy is generally understood as the theory and the practice of engaging students as creators of course content, rather than simply requiring them to be just passive consumers of it. Proponents of this framework view it as a form of experiential learning in which students demonstrate greater understanding of and engagement with course content through the act of creating it. Now, bringing these elements together, our dear friends, Mr. Wiley and Mr. Hilton, proposed something they called OER-Enabled Pedagogy as a set of teaching and learning practices that are only possible or practical in the context of the 5R permissions that are characteristic of OERs. And this is the operational definition that I embrace for this particular case study. So a little bit of contextual information. Here's where the action took place. In 2019, I created a new course on international and comparative librarianship for the University of Buffalo's Department of Information Science. And the course was online, asynchronously delivered for 26 master's level students. And like many Open Education Week participants, I dislike the notion of having students purchase textbooks when all the information they need to be successful is already available in the library or is openly available elsewhere. However, the initial stages of development for this course were really stymied by what I deemed to be the substandard quality of supporting literature on international librarianship. And as you can see here, my general assessment is reinforced by Mr. Lohr, and perhaps unsurprisingly, there were no relevant OER texts available for me to adopt for the course at that time. And so I viewed this as an opportunity to adopt an open pedagogical framework. And accordingly, students in this course were assigned to create their own textbook. Each student authored a chapter about libraries in the field of librarianship in a non-North American country. The textbook was developed under a Creative Commons license chosen by students as an OER, allowing free use, remixing, and repurposing in future sections of the course or in similar courses offered in library and information science programs at other institutions. And the completed volume was published on the University of Buffalo's institutional repository. So as noted, this was an experiment. You're going to hear that word from me a couple of times. And I emphasized that with students. And I have to say they were not just willing, but enthusiastic participants. And as a result, once again, I view this as an opportunity to investigate their perceptions of this undertaking. And I imagined the following, that moving beyond the traditional one and done term paper would resonate with students, that they would appreciate the opportunity to contribute to the professional discourse by addressing gaps in the literature, that they would benefit by coming out of the course with a publication for their portfolios or their dossiers, that developing an OER would resonate in particular with these students, given library and information science ethos and the library field's abiding principle of free to all. And finally, that students would support this manner of experimentation in the context of a research university, which was undertaken very simply to improve teaching and learning. So my study explored these hypotheses, and tangentially, these additional questions that you see here proposed by our friends Mr. Wiley and Mr. Hilton about student perceptions of creating their own course content as OERs. To understand students' perceptions of this open pedagogical experiment, I collected anonymized data by way of a voluntary survey and a required reflection paper assignment. The latter of these was required because, as noted by Ms. Hegarty, reflection is a key component of open pedagogical practice. So given our sort of time constraints here and the very possibility that all of us are a bit weary at the end of the work week, I will report what I deem to be the key results of this study. And I'll share those results and complement them with corresponding excerpts from student reflections. And for the sake of efficiency and hopefully engagement, I recommend that all of you attendees listen to my reported survey results and read the student reflections. And starting from the top, all of the survey respondents reported that this experiment, creating their own course textbook, was their first experience with an open pedagogical framework, as exemplified by this reflection from student P. 60% of respondents indicated that making their coursework openly available was somewhat unnerving, but most came to accept and even embrace the notion, as exemplified by this reflection from student W. All of the respondents recognized the educational value of adopting an open pedagogical framework for this course, as exemplified by this reflection from student G. And all of the respondents supported the idea of using this framework to teach future sections of the course, as exemplified by this reflection from student B. All respondents embraced the notion of moving beyond the traditional one and done term paper and giving life to their coursework, moving forward as an OER. And students were profusely emphatic on this point, as exemplified by just this one reflection from student R. All respondents reported that they benefited from receiving peer feedback on their textbook chapters. Peer feedback is another key component of open pedagogical practice, and student N provided some generous reflection on that particular aspect. All of the respondents reported the appeal of publishing as a product. How's that for alliteration? Of publishing as a product of this course, as exemplified by these reflections from students L and N. And all respondents indicated their support for making their work available under a Creative Commons license as exemplified by this reflection from student E. Okay, so there we have it. Those were the key results as I see them. This prompts, I think, some relevant discussion. So logic holds that the views of students who participated in this study were affected by levels of engagement with me and with the course subject materials. And despite anonymous data collection and voluntary participation in the survey, I think the fact that the data was collected through a course platform, courseware platform, suggests the likelihood of selection bias. And it's also noteworthy, we need to say this, that this is a highly contextualized investigation, right? Involving 26 graduate level library and information science students in an asynchronously delivered online course, right? There's a lot of factors in the equation. And so that term comes up, right? The results are therefore not generalizable. Other factors to keep in mind. This was, you're going to hear that word again, an experiment. The focus was on students' perceptions. And importantly, there were no controls in place to measure student learning, which I think is where we need to be with this manner of research moving forward. I think my friend Mr. Hilton would probably agree with that assessment. All of that being said, the results of this investigation appear to me to give credence to my original hypotheses on the use of open pedagogy in this particular course. The evidence, again, to me, is fairly compelling that students in this study ascribed a positive learning experience to the implementation of an open pedagogical framework. And they held for its continued use in future sections of the course. Students were enthusiastic in their embrace of creating renewable versus disposable coursework. They also expressed satisfaction with contributing to the professional literature, building the discipline's nascent OER record, and having a publication to feature in their curricular and professional dossiers. In terms of lessons learned, many students commented about the scale of this open textbook creation project and the compressed summer semester. Some found the ambitious timeframe motivating, but most found it to be pretty intense, as exemplified by a couple of the comments that you see here from students M and P. This next item really stuck with me. Some students reported levels of discomfort with writing chapters about other countries and cultures as outsiders. And frankly, I regard this particular point as something of a blind spot in my own course planning. Some concluding thoughts to get us to a point where we can have a little bit of face-to-face time here. The completed volume, International Libraries, an open textbook, was published on the University at Buffalo's institutional repository. Interestingly, I just received an email message from a library science professor in India who found this thing and asked me why there were no chapters devoted to libraries in India. So it's receiving a lot of traffic and people are seeing it. More details about this particular study are included in this paper, which was published in the Journal of Librarianship and Scholarly Communication. The research data is available on the Open Science Framework. The slides and the notes for this presentation are also available on the Open Science Framework. This is a list of the cited research I used for this presentation. And I'm really thankful for your attention and for the opportunity to talk about this for a couple minutes. So I'm going to switch my video back on here. And there we have it. Oh, and I see some familiar faces there too.
Great. Thank you, Christopher. So if there are questions, you're more than welcome to unmute your mic and talk, have a conversation here with us. You can also type in the chat if you're more comfortable doing that, but we certainly invite your feedback and your thoughts. One thing, Christopher, that we're just a little bit curious about, and your students kind of pointed out to this, just being slightly uncomfortable reporting on some things that maybe were outside of their scope. Did you initially have a particular intention with the non-American countries when you assigned it that
well,
way?
yeah, the course is focused on international and comparative librarianship. So it's sort of the point of the course is to get students to think globally about the profession.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Other thoughts, Trudy? I saw you, I think,
Yeah,
highlighted there.
I did. So, Chris, you mentioned Hegarty and the elements of open pedagogy from that framework.
Yeah.
I've worked with that one. I've also worked with one by Reynolds, Gibbs, and Zemke. It's really just sort of a list of qualities of open pedagogy. And one of those I'd be interested in getting your thoughts on. And it includes, I'll just briefly mention agency, choice, expansion, creativity, student constructed, open-ended problems, risk and goodness. And then the one I'm curious about is unmeasurable outcomes. So they say that bypassing the traditional outcome measurement that aligns with closed learning. And I think that speaks in a way to what you were sort of mentioning as one of the, and I don't have the word at hand, elements that you had that needs to be looked into. So I was just curious about your thoughts.
So I think, did you mention that particular work in your presentation earlier this week, Trudy? I was trying to keep up with the notes.
I didn't. I can put the information in chat.
Well, that would be great. Thank you. So I think there's a couple questions there. You rattled off sort of all of those descriptors, agency and creativity and so on and so forth. And, all of these things really resonate with me because I think they resonate with students. All of those descriptors are sort of folded into this more general notion of having the courage to give up control of the classroom and to allow and to empower students to be co-creators of course content and as a result sort of co-managers of their own learning, right? So all of that completely resonates with me. There was that last aspect there that you mentioned, Trudy, that I think
The unmeasurable outcomes.
Yeah, so there's a very limited number of legitimate, let's call it, research. There's a very limited number of legitimate studies out there that we recognize as measuring student learning in courses in which students are co-creators of course content. And Mr. Hilton has published 2 analyses of those studies. And he's been able to demonstrate, I think, fairly compellingly that learning is at least equal to that which takes place in more traditional classrooms. But I think a whole hell of a lot more research needs to be done so that we can say that more conclusively. And frankly, I'd like to be a part of that research moving forward.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you for posting that too in the chat, Trudy. It looks like there's a question from Mike. Mike, I don't know if you want to extrapolate on this.
Yeah, I put it in the chat. So Chris, I'm really just interested in that hesitation, and I think it's a hesitation on I'm glad students acknowledge being uncomfortable and kind of writing a chapter on a country or a territory or a province that they're unfamiliar with, and then their hesitation in doing so. Was the hesitation less in content and more about that they were going to have to share what they created? Because I'm thinking just in my K through whatever experience, the number of country reports I had to do, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just wondering, is it that sharing element that students are now more conscious of, like, wow, if I'm going to share this, it has to be grounded in some kind of understanding.
Yeah, so I think there's two things there based on the feedback that I received from students, Mike. One is sort of the public nature of their work, right? And so they, want it to be, if people are going to be seeing this, right? So that's one thing, but this sort of, I'm not sure how to qualify this. I hope this comes across all right, but this sort of dawning of the age of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think was really the main driver of those comments that I received from students. And as I mentioned in one of those slides, I really do regard that as something of a blind spot in my own planning for the course. When I saw those comments, I just could not believe that I did not see that coming. So I'm going to have to find a way to get around that, and I'm not sure how to do that. I think I'm going to rely on the students to help me with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I was just thinking that too, Christopher. What are their suggestions for, what could make that a different experience for them? Right.
So in the comments that I received from students, they simply commented on their feelings. They didn't really have any suggestions for how to get around that. Mm-hmm. So the next time I anticipate teaching this course is probably 2022. One of the reasons for that is built in to this course is the option for students to join me in a trip to another non-North American country to investigate the libraries in the field of librarianship in those areas. And, that's has not been possible for the last 2 years.
Right.
So I'm going to give this a lot of thought between now and 2022. But I really anticipate engaging students in that discussion and in determining how to move forward.
Absolutely. Allison, I see that you have your hand up too.
Yes, I was wondering if you had any discussions with, I know some of the colleges are doing virtual international studies, and connecting over the internet. Have you put any thought into, as a way of sort of, it's like evening the playing field, for lack of a better term, is like partnering with a non-North American class and having them write about North American libraries while you write about their libraries.
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
It's like, in this way, it's like, while it's always important to have an insider's perspective, an outsider can offer things that some people just don't notice. A fish doesn't know it's swimming in water. So I think one of the ways I think that would ease tension on both sides is like, okay, so both of us get to do it. It's like, so we get to see it from both sides, outsider perspective, rather than seeing it as being like colonialist or it's like overly patronizing.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. That's a really interesting idea. And listening to how you were describing your idea made me think about the potential for taking advantage of another aspect of this course, which was I conducted video recorded interviews with librarians from, I don't know, 15 or 16 different countries around the world. And I have to tell you, those were some of the most enjoyable conversations I have ever had in this profession. And it occurs to me, I mean, I now have 15 or 16 friends around the world who I can potentially, I don't want to say take advantage, I can potentially take advantage of the opportunity of these friendships to maybe do something exactly the way that you just described. So thank you for that idea. I really love that.
It's a great suggestion, Allison. Thank you for that. And Mike also, Christopher, I'm not sure if you can see the chat, but also suggested maybe SUNY COIL may have something to help connect students as well.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with that, we can.
Yes, I am.
And Robin?
Yeah, hi Chris.
Hey,
Wonderful
Robin.
love the project, love open pedagogy, and just expanding a little more on Allison's idea. Right after this meeting, I'm meeting with some of the COIL folks from around the world, and but Mara Huber at UB would definitely be able to help you with the virtual international exchange to do exactly what Allison had suggested.
Okay.
But I also was wondering, you had mentioned, and I love this idea too, getting the advice of your students. You know, how might they think that you could go forward and do something a little differently to address some of the things that you didn't consider?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, have you thought about following up with your summer students with a second survey question? Saying, okay, so this kind of came out as a result of your input from the summer. Do any of you have an idea of how we might change that when this course is offered again? So just another thought to share.
That's an interesting idea, Robin. I'm thinking about the practicality of this now that you're describing it. A lot of the implications that came out of this whole undertaking definitely could do with some follow-up. Makes perfect sense. A lot of the students who were in my course at the time have already graduated. So I'm guessing that the department keeps track of ways of staying in contact with these folks. And I'm going to reach out to the department chair to ask if that is indeed the case. And if so, to ask his permission to maybe follow up with students on that. These are really great suggestions. Thank you very much for that.
And was it this past summer, Chris, or right, that you did this work?
No,
or the summer before?
2019, yeah.
Hopefully some of them took advantage of their alumni UB email. And in that case, they'd still have their same UBIT name, but then I just realized yesterday that the ending of their email changes to, I think, ubalumni.edu, but I can look that and send you the exact wording of that. So you can try sending it out that way too.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you.
Sure.
I know I still have my UB email because I graduated from LIS at UB, so yay. It's like,
And
so
were you able to keep the at buffalo.edu on yours? Just curious.
Yeah, I graduated in 2014, I believe. So I still have my .edu, and it hasn't changed to best of my knowledge. So
Just learned yesterday that it has changed. So anybody that is trying to get students into their Coursera courses, Trudy, Aaron, just to let you know that. And Chris, maybe your course could make a great Coursera course in itself.
I've thought about that.
yeah, and you can always contact the people who are in charge of the call centers for fundraising. They usually have up-to-date information on everybody.
Of course, they
I was
do.
one of those
Probably
people
more
who-
up to date than the department.
Yeah, I was one of those people who would call and annoy people. So it's like, I remember. It's like, so if you need contact information, they most likely have the most up-to-date stuff.
Chris, I was wondering to bounce off of Allison's idea. I was recently involved in a presentation with a German-Indian collaboration. This was of undergraduate students. But, and this might not fit your course topic as well as Allison's suggestion, but I wonder if you were able to link with another institution or institutions having small teams of students work on sort of global problems facing libraries.
So I connected very well with a library and information science professor from Seoul. And we've stayed in pretty constant communication since. I hadn't even, an example, another blind spot. I hadn't even considered that, Trudy, but I love that idea. So this session is really helpful to me. I'm so grateful for all of these wonderful suggestions. I'm taking voluminous notes here as we're talking.
It's always good when it can be a two-way benefit, right?
Yes, indeed.
Great. Well, these are just some ideas to help kind of further the open pedagogy, that approach that you have flowing through that course. And so I think these are great suggestions. And also, when you teach it again too, you can also expand on your survey of students and ask them, what are some things that they could think of that might enhance the course as well.
I feel another research
Students
paper
have great
coming on.
perception. Yeah, exactly. We're making more work for you while we're here.
That's what we do.
Well, that's great discussion. Are there other thoughts or questions?
I guess just one more to add on to what you just said, Erin. Chris, maybe a pre-course survey next time you offer the course also to get the students' mindset.
Yeah.
How can we do this best?
I think students have access to course material. Well, I know that we can permit access to the course site. Is it like 2 weeks or 10 days in advance of the course starting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 2 weeks, but you can even do it on like the first day of class, just to start getting that, so you got everybody drop dead into the course.
Yeah,
To start to get their thinking, this is what we're going to be kind of, struggling with.
If I have permission to teach this course during a more traditional 14-week semester, I think I'd have time to do that. But if I'm forced to do it in the summertime again, I'm not sure if I'll have enough time for that.
True.
Yeah.
Hello, Christopher. I want to thank you for sharing your information. I learned a great deal from you today. And I'm actually doing a lot of the things that you spoke of in your presentation in my assistive technology course. There are 8 critical reflection papers where the students are writing off of OER material that we've gotten offline. So it's working really well for me. And so one of the things I had thought about during your presentation for you, though, was that some people may feel more comfortable writing about countries where maybe they come from or where their culture lies.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be a matter, too, of helping out that gap, maybe.
Indeed. So I had a couple of students who did write their chapters about areas of the world that their families came from. One of the challenges there is I didn't want to have any of the students writing the same chapters. So what I had to do in order to give everyone something of what they were looking for is I asked students to give me 3 countries that they were interested in writing about in order of their interest. And I tried my best to give everyone number 1, but a few of them had to move down to number 2 so that we didn't have 2 about Hungary, 2 about Indonesia, and so on and so forth. I wanted to do it, it was an experiment. And I wanted to do everything that I could to make students feel comfortable with the experiment. And I thought, Richard, as you suggested, that could potentially be something that would be a little bit more comfortable for them. I couldn't make it work for all 26, but we tried our best.
Yeah, it sounds like you did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I think that's the challenge when you have a certain set amount or topics, right, to cover, in your case, countries to cover, right? And then they have to be distributed among the students that you have. And so while you try to provide choice, there is always, you know, going to be that area there. So I think your approach to kind of asking them first which ones they're interested in and then accommodating as best you can, that's really what you know, what you can do.
Yeah.
Are there any other closing thoughts before I wrap us up? Thank you for your conversation, your discussion, your suggestions, lots of suggestions.
Yeah, I want to thank all of you. I got a lot out of this, which is all that matters. The suggestions are spot on. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. I just want to, you know, thank you for taking your time to submit this presentation and be with us today to share your experience and your students' experience. We really appreciate that. The session, of course, is recorded, and I'll put the link in the chat for those of you that are looking for any recordings from this week. We also have session materials posted there, slides, all of that sort of thing. And we are doing a survey for each session. And so I'll post that in the chat as well. You can do one survey for all the sessions you attended, or you can complete the survey multiple times if you'd like to do it individually. So I just want to thank you all for your attendance, and I will keep this room open. We have another session at 11 and again at noon. So this room will be open all day until about 1 o'clock.
Everybody.